Thank you so much. So I think I have a great panel today with me, and it represents the entire geography of the world, US, Europe, WHO, India as well. So welcome. And just to begin my panel discussion, I would say the quality is an integral part of the pharma industry. And consistency in manufacturing and analysis in the laboratory is the key to efficiency. And minimizing failures is the most important focus area in our pharma industry. Product failure due to limited knowledge of the manufacturing processes or mistakes made during the analysis directly impacts the cost of the manufacturing and the availability of medicines in a timely manner. We heard in the previous sessions about the upgradations of technology, both in the manufacturing and the analysis. This will definitely help us to mitigate our risk of failures. But the most important part is the acceptance of these technologies, regulatory acceptance of these changes for the products which are filed, and the most feared is the fear of failure of these technologies if it doesn't work, and what would be the cost of implementation, and what's the return on investment of these technologies when we talk about it. Most important is that if you are using some of the earlier technologies, if you want to bring in newer ones, what is the transition? How do you overlap them? How long do we continue parallelly? Is there a way to really transition from the existing one to the newer ones? And as you also heard, the competency is also something that we would be talking about and we are concerned about when we introduce technologies in our system. When we have these technologies, what's the scalability? What's the chance of it's getting upgraded? Will it sustain the upgradability and also the business that we would envisage? And obviously, the most common question is about COVID and its impact on the pharma industry and the technology that we implement. Not to forget, the COVID has also brought in a lot of new initiatives by the government of India and the world around, and we'd like to talk about it. To start with, I would ask this question to Dr. Kristan. I'm sure that USFDA has conducted a lot of inspections around the world. And is it possible for you to share some of the examples of, say, best practices in quality that would have been observed by FDA inspectors, which can be considered for implementation in our facilities over here?
First, let me say thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. When I saw that what the topic was going to be for the panel, I was very excited because this is a topic that's obviously important to not only industry, but obviously the regulators here. And it's something that we have focused on with our inspectors and our investigators rather. And it actually gave me an opportunity to talk a little bit more with our investigators about what they've been seeing a little bit more than some of the other conversations we have, and it's been a really positive response once I've talked to the investigators. So for best practices, examples of that, when I talked to investigators, they said the best practices are when a firm takes quality seriously at every level of production, and then it's applied to all the systems in a facility to ensure that there's quality of oversight in the supply chain. So, for example, that there's quality production and quality in the control labs. There's been drastic improvement in this area over the past couple of years. Another example is when there's oversight in over the not just like the systems within one firm, but oversight over the contract facilities, and that there's oversight in the purchasing of raw material. When firms have executed that well, you can see it that it's pervasive in the most positive form, that it really affects all these systems within the production. We understand that businesses evaluate competitive prices for raw materials. So, they're looking for what is the best way to get the most material. However, it's really important to consider the quality of raw materials. When I talked to another investigator, they had mentioned that some of the best practices they have seen is when there's true engagement from upper management in quality issues and identifying, and then they can address not only quality issues, but encourage better quality trends in facilities overall. And another investigator also said that the best practice that they have seen is when there's better oversight over contract manufacturers and analytical service providers. And so to be a little bit more specific of one example, one investigator mentioned that they had visited several sites that really incorporate ICH Q10 guidance into every part of the production and every part of, I guess, you should view it as two legs. One is the physical production line, but also instituting these concepts to every staff member. It really, it's not just about management. It's not just about like the middle management. It's about every part of the facility, including the employees. So in regards to the ICH Q10 guidance, folks have seen that there have been firms that really incorporate the language from that guidance into their own quality systems. And it's just such a positive movement and progress that we've been seeing in that line. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much. I think that's a great insight. And you touched upon each and every area of the manufacturing and the supply chain, including the contract manufacturers and the analytical lab support that we take. And this is quite important. I would request Dr. Sotirios to also touch upon the same question. I see that he's got good experience from academics, industry, and now as a regulator. So what could be your experience in this area?
Very much, Dr. Rajiv, and also thanks to the organizers for this great opportunity to participate again in this great event organized by by the IEPA. So I think that what Kristan mentioned, all the different examples that you mentioned, cover globally more or less what are an inspector's expectations during an inspection of a manufacturer. I would just summarize in what an inspector's dream would be: full compliance to regulatory requirements and GMP standards. This is what we expect during each and every inspection. We understand that sometimes there might be variations from that. There might be also justifications for that, which usually we are open to discuss and see what the company will bring up. But in general, I would say that the first and biggest commandment, if there would be a list of inspectors' commandments, would be comply to GMP in general. I would just like to focus on one specific thing. So in order to achieve this compliance to the regulatory requirements and the GMP expectations, there needs to be knowledge of them, deep, profound knowledge of them, which means at least two things: that the company should closely follow scientific and regulatory developments, and of course take an effort to continuously train their staff. This, of course, would mostly involve external training. Internal training also has its role, but usually it's just recycling of the knowledge which is already there. So external training is of paramount importance. And of course, being an inspector, whenever there is a discussion about external training provided to several staff members, we always ask for evidence of that training, either certificate of this training or some other proof that the staff has actually attended this kind of trainings, and also that they shared the knowledge afterwards with their concerned colleagues. So to that, I would just add a couple of other things, which we always expect during an inspection. And in all the cases that we face that, usually the inspection outcomes were successful. So honesty and open-mindedness are definitely expected by the manufacturers. I think I would stop there for the moment.
Thank you so much. I think this is a great, again, a very good insight. You spoke about the competency to a large extent, and obviously, how they talk and also understand the process, and that's where the consistency of the manufacturing and the analysis will come in, and that shows in the way that the site would operate. I think this takes me to another question to Dr. Manisha Shridhar. Now, Dr. Manisha Shridhar has been involved with WHO, and she has gone into several areas, including the government of India. And I could see that she has been involved in so many training programs, and especially, I would say in a country like India, we have the the National Academy of Administration, which is one of the premier instituted by the Indian government. And she has been involved as a head of training and research development wing. And she's developed programs for the civil servants, which is something quite unique. And the question that comes up to my mind for Dr. Manisha is, WHO has conducted some training programs as part of the Government of India initiative. So, and especially to upskill the quality systems. Is there something that you could tell us on any kind of takeaways from these programs that you were part of it?
Thanks, Rajiv. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, because I have some problem with the video, so just bear with me. I hope I can fix it towards the end of the session. So thank you for this kind introduction. And I was actually very happy to see that very early on, Mr. Samir Mehta has mentioned this initiative with the MSME. And in fact, that was part of your inaugural session this afternoon. And Aparna also, Dr. Aparna, the Secretary Pharmaceuticals, also alluded to it in her opening remarks. And I think one of the big takeaways from this exercise was that the COVID-19, which was a big challenge, was actually converted into an opportunity through this program. I remember when Mr. Sudarshan Jain and me and Madhur from the country office, we were actually in touch with the WHO quarters on a weekly basis when we were looking at the movement of pharmaceuticals during the COVID situation. And what began as an exercise, something in February 2020, we had a discussion among ourselves, and there was some prior work that had been done between the regional office and the country office. And that ended up with a very deep discussion with Mr. Sudarshan Jain. And I think IPA and later on Dr. Surinder Singh, who joined us from the WHO in the WHO GSS plus IPA project, so which became a project which we took forward, actually resulted in these taking up a whole lot of initiatives for getting the MSMEs look at quality systems. And in this, I think Shirish also played an excellent role, because he was able to help us to align much of the training. You talked about academic training, but unless this training is useful to the enterprises, they would not have come on board. And we conducted, each training was 12 days, so it was not easy. And there were, as Mr. Samir Mehta also pointed out, there were 6 workshops that took place. So 12 days back-to-back workshops was a big event. And we were supported in this initiative by the Ministry of Health, by the DCGI. He had an active participation, also by the Department of Pharmaceuticals and the Department of Biotechnology. And as a result, the numbers were also mentioned earlier. But what is important is that we are now going ahead with a second phase of the training, which is the mentorship part. This is perhaps one of the only training programs which has built-in a mentorship program. And a lot of credit goes to our partners, the JSS Academy in Masuru, and also IPA for aligning and designing the mentorship program. One of the important things we learned was that, there's no dearth of expertise in India. We were in fact pleasantly surprised that some of the very complicated issues also with respect to technology, upgradation and facilities in terms of sterility assurance or material systems and quality were discussed in great length by the experts which were brought on board. And so both in the terms of procedure, where a virtual workshop mode engaged with people beyond just a few people who could attend the workshop, but also in terms of technical content, this was a path breaker for us. We do feel, however, that when we move towards the virtual audit and then audit for the enterprises, assisting them to actually move forward, we do think that a mix of both a virtual and an in-person training would be useful. So on two fronts, on the technical front and on the procedure front, this was a great learning experience for all of us and for the enterprises as well. Over.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Manisha. I think your experience in this area is amazing because you have been involved in such trainings, and now you talk about the trainings to the most important value chain aspect of the pharma industry and try to improvise their competency. Coming back to my next question to Dr. Rubina. Hi, ma'am. Good evening. And again, she comes with a lot of strong industry background, good experience in vaccines, and a lot of experience in conducting inspections in several industries. My question to her is, coming back on the same topic about the technologies, what major technologies should Indian pharma industry pick up as soon as possible to, improvise their way of working?
First of all, thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes.
So thank you very much for this opportunity, and would like to start with a disclaimer that what I say here is will not be considered upon as the views of CDSCO, but as such as a regulator, my understanding. So if I say in one word what should be the technology which should be immediately adopted, I should say that compliance to the CGMP standards and the regulations, where when I say C, we mean current. So the industry should adopt the current technologies and systems which should meet the regulatory requirements. Now, it's a very, it cannot be answered in a single line, basically in a single sentence that these are the technologies you adopt all the computerized system, you adopt everything automated system, good automated manufacturing practices, you adopt process analytical. This cannot be the answer. So when we use the term CGMP, the regulation use it in a very flexible manner, and we mean that it is up to the intended use. What is your requirement, the industry's requirement. So it is as per the requirements of individual industries, they should adopt the technologies, the systems. So besides, when we say that you should have the industry, there should be a well-designed facility, good equipment, calibrated, validated equipment, facilities, well scientifically designed products, and also system of technology transfer to commercial manufacturing. So you have a good formulation, product development system, technology transfer to the manufacturing up till the product discontinuation. That as an integrated approach, which our previous speaker was saying and talking about the ICH-Q10. So overall umbrella, under the overall umbrella of the quality management system. And also with this, I would add the words also the quality risk management principles, because it's up to the manufacturers to identify the risk inherent to their production, their facilities, the products they're intended to market. And accordingly, you have the technologies and the systems which they should adopt, so that there is finally a system of well-controlled, and a system is established which is monitored, control mechanism is there, And finally, which will reduce errors, contamination, mix-up, and actually provide quality safe, efficacious medicines. So the product should be developed properly, it should be properly transferred, it should be scaled up, it should be scientifically developed products with all tested specifications, setting the specifications, going to the commercial manufacturing till the, so you use the pharmaceutical quality management systems throughout the product life cycle. And would like to use the same word again and again, that it's not the quality tested at the product, but it should be developed as a quality by design. So finally, so it's up to the manufacturers what is their intended use, what is the facilities, what are the type of the products, what is the complexities of the product, size of the facility, and size of what they intended to do. So accordingly, so CGMP word is, as the GMP requirements are very flexible. The word is flexible in that way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rubina. I think that again comes with your background and your experience of industry and the expectations from the regulatory agencies and from the industry. Coming back to Dr. Kristan, now we heard about all these things, the expectations, they're very high. I mean, there's a lot of things but what support can we expect from the regulatory agencies for moving from the existing filed procedures and technologies to the newer ones? I mean, this is the dilemma that the industry carries, that I have a technology over there, I see under other industries, but can I implement it? I have my filed technologies years back. How do I transition? What kind of support should or can the industry expect from the regulatory agencies in this line? Because the guidelines are very clear, but there's always a dilemma, should we implement or not implement?
So, I think this should be of no surprise, because I did catch the tail end of the previous panel when there was discussion on supply chains and how to make them more resilient. And this fits in, the answer I have fits in with that. Because as we look at, how we all manage through this pandemic and try to future-proof for future challenges, regulators and industry have been evaluating how to make supply chains, just bolster them, to make them more resilient. And so from a regulator perspective, we're not only looking at challenges with drug shortages, and particularly related to what we've deemed as essential medicines, but how to just strengthen supply chains itself. And so the reason why I bring up the pandemic is because FDA is particularly interested in how emerging technologies can support this exercise of bolstering the supply chains. So, like I said, I heard someone in the earlier panel mention continuous manufacturing, and FDA is taking a closer look on how to support that with industry. And so, Congress, the U.S. Congress has supported FDA's interest in this, and so FDA has been investing in research projects to essentially help FDA determine how best to improve and foster growth with industry. And so, to give an example of what FDA has been doing, our Center for Drug Evaluation and Research has established several initiatives in this area in response to these research programs that I just mentioned. And so, one thing I should mention here is that they've created this emerging technology program, also called ETP, and it's designed to provide a gateway for, before the submission. So early on discussions of innovative technologies and approaches between a candidate drug and manufacturer and the regulator, so FDA in this instance. So technology may be used at a facility that manufactures multiple products instead of just one, and it could really have an impact on multiple drug products, bolstering it. So on a similar note, our Center for Biologics and Evaluation and Research also established an advanced technologies team So it has a similar note where they offer pre-submission support for applicants looking to adopt advanced manufacturing technologies for development of human drugs. You know, we are also looking for more opportunities to collaborate with other regulators in this field as well, so that, you know, it's an overall better understanding. Kind of like, you know, along the similar theme of the last last question I answered, is that, you know, no man is an island, and so it's better to pull everyone in and really, you know, focus on disseminating information and making sure that people understand the new technologies, both from a regulator perspective and industry. It's not just about industry, you know, bolstering their own technology, but it's also regulators understanding it too, so that they can quickly approve the new methods that the companies are suggesting. So, you know, I think looking to the future, I think people will see more programs like the emerging technologies program in other settings. And so hopefully, you know, it essentially will encourage more conversation between regulators and industry to further technology.
Thank you so much. So that's quite reassuring for us, and we'll be going ahead and collaborating more with the regulatory agencies. And you mentioned a very good point that you also started collaborating with the other agencies around the world. So that is really good, because we operate in several geographies, and if we can, you know, introduce these technologies across for all the geographies at the same time, I think that's quite helpful in terms of our ability to upgrade our facilities within the facilities also. Thank you so much for that. My next question is to Dr. Manisha again. I mean, you have been into several wide area of you know, activities, right from your WHO assignments to your Government of India, and also in the industry, and also the civil services. From your vantage point, what should be the focus area of pharmaceutical industry to achieve quality excellence?
Thank you, Rajiv, for a very interesting question. I do think that when I don't think I can tell the doyens of pharmaceutical industry about quality. You know much better, and you know your system so well. And neither am I a regulator, so I don't intend to go on that path either, although I know a bit of everything, but I am not an expert on either of the two. But I do feel that thanks to COVID-19, COVID-19 has done a lot of harm, but it has done one thing which has brought health on the focus for everyone. Even the man on the street can talk about an RT-PCR test. And that's something amazing, because everybody knows what they're talking about, and everybody seems to know a lot about health. And I think this is something that the pharmaceutical industry should look to their advantage, because this is a rare moment at time when the vaccines have actually made a huge difference to the way we are now living today. At least there is hope. I remember when we began in February 2020 with our WHO discussions, we didn't know where we are, and we had no idea when the first vaccines are going to come on the picture. So the pharmaceutical industry as a whole has come in a position where they have actually delivered. The science has delivered. So I think when we talk about quality, we need to look at this in a larger conundrum on how we can. We talked about the Sustainable Development Goals, and I'm sure we are way off the goals because of the COVID-19. But what is it that the pharmaceutical industry can look at it in a way to move forward on a larger global agenda? And in fact, you know, while I was discussing with, in a number of, you mentioned about a couple of forums I have been in, and I will take the liberty of discussing that. Even if you look at the UN system, we, in the WHO and in the World Health Organization, as you can well imagine, we have so many resolutions on disease programs, whether it is malaria, or tuberculosis, or the neglected tropical diseases, and all the good efforts that are being done in this. And Kristan just mentioned about the close collaboration which has taken place with the regulators. So this is a unique moment in time when we can bring this together. But even beyond the World Health Assembly, if you look at the UN resolutions, you will find that in assisting in other bodies, for example, UNCTAD is tasked with the idea of consumer protection. And if you look at the 1985 resolution, which was passed in the UN, and the 2016 resolution, which was passed again on consumer protection, and then you look at what they did for COVID-19 in the last years, they are all focusing on pharmaceutical enterprises. And the objective, the first objective when they look at these resolutions is that what can we do to have good health and provide for safety and quality of pharmaceuticals. In fact, if I remember correctly, one of the resolutions, I think it is the 1985 one, where a whole para is actually devoted to pharmaceuticals. So I would actually like to urge, especially IPA, you're doing the summit is also taking at a very opportune time. It would be all these resolutions that we have, and particularly at a global level, these are just aspirations, unless we can transfer them and transform them into policy actions. And this is a unique time we have. Perhaps there can be a study group or a discussion group that is established by the IPA, where we look at these global aspirations that have long been, where pharmaceuticals has long been in focus. And how can we convert that into something very tangible, given the very positive environment we are in today for public health as a whole? Many years ago, if you talked about public health, we were always strained for funds. But I find that now everybody realizes that without health, any of our economic goals are not going to be achieved unless we can handle our public health goals. So we are at a cusp in terms of global decision making and in terms of policy making, where alliances like the IPA and all of us put together who believe on the advantages of taking this forward. And then I also want to make one comment that the role of the regulator has been very critical in COVID-19. They, rather than a policeman's role, they have acted as a facilitator all through, actually helping with this clinical trials and looking at how the industry can work with them and get their science on board to be able to deliver. So given this environment, I would urge you and through you in this forum that maybe we need to establish some kind of a study group which can bring these global aspirations more to the forefront and actually capitalize on this very positive global energy and national energy for public health, and to take it forward for each one of us. Because if we can solve our health problems, there is no limit to what nationally or internationally we will all achieve. Over to you. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think the government initiatives which are coming up, and especially which have been rolled out in the last more than a year now, I think they are in the same line, and they are quite encouraging. So it's not only for the healthcare, as you rightly mentioned, for the general public, but also the industry in particular. So that's going to be quite helpful for us as well. Thank you so much for this insight. So Dr. Kristan, just hearing everyone, what do you think are the learnings that the Indian pharma industry should apply to improve the quality systems? You did mention, but just as a summary to your.
That's a great question. I will go back to it's. I guess I've had the same theme for throughout this panel, which is, more discussion. We've been seeing firms talk to each other and learn from each other's mistakes. And that is such a great improvement. The fact that firms are willing to share, hey, I got this 483 observation, that there was an issue with X, and to share with that so that others can learn from each other is so important. So I would say continue to talk. Not only, like I said, have quality be a part of the whole culture of the firm from the beginning to end and from management top to bottom, but also, be be a part of the conversation as a community of, manufacturers. That's very important. We've been very happy to see that more of those type of conversations have been happening amongst manufacturers. I will say, I did mention ICHQ 10. And so, in general, I would say these guidances that are relevant to quality manufacturing are in everyone's fingertips, but it's really making sure that they're actively a part of the evaluation of the manufacturing process. So a solid understanding of ICHQ9 on risk management would also be good for manufacturers who maybe don't have that one open all the time. In addition to Q10, which is the Pharmaceutical Quality Systems guidance. So I guess the one last thing I would say is that when a firm receives an observation from an investigator, they tend to just focus on that one issue instead of the whole picture. And so one thing I would say is just to take a step back from the specific observations that maybe a firm has received and see where where to fix it overall. It reminds me, if you're building a house and you have a leak, you obviously want to fix the leak, but you have to look at what's under the floorboards or wherever the leak is coming from to really understand why did it happen and how to avoid that from going forward and affecting the rest of the structure of the house. And so it's the same thing here. Don't just focus on putting the Band-Aid on the issue. Focus on how to make a sturdier foundation.
Well said. So definitely, I mean, we do learn from the 483s that are being published, and that's something that is quite a learning experience for everyone in the pharma industry. You said that. Coming back to this question on or the point that Dr. Manisha mentioned about the COVID, my next question is to Dr. Sotirios. On, we always talk about the COVID as an era and also as a major pandemic, but how would you see this as a point from EDQM, and especially how did the industry respond to it? I mean, what are the changes that you see from your inspections point of view?
Thank you very much, Dr. Rajiv, for this question. Actually, I have prepared a short presentation, not only about the challenges faced by our inspection program during this period, but also concerning the perspectives of our inspection program as we move, hopefully, towards the post-COVID era. I hope it doesn't get too boring for the participants, but it would be nice if we could have the slides, if the organizers could bring up the slides.
I'll ask the backup team to, or backup.
Thank
yeah,
you.
there
Great.
It comes up.
Great, thank you very much. I guess we can move on directly to the next slide. So challenges and perspectives in the COVID-19 and post-COVID-19 era in the frame of the EDQM inspection program. And in the next slide, we can see a short, in the next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. A short overview. So before moving on to the challenges faced during this period and also to the perspectives, a very quick introduction to what the EDQM is and what is its role in the European and global regulatory framework. Next slide, please. I'm sure that most of your participants are aware of the position of the EDQM as a directorate of the Council of Europe, the Council of Europe being the largest international European organization. So the EDQM has started, its roots date back to 1964, where the Convention on the Elaboration of the European Pharmacopoeia was signed by, if I remember well, 9 member states of the Council of Europe. And today, the date, of course, there is wrong. So today we have almost 40 member states, most of the European countries, plus the European Union, and also a large number of observers worldwide. We can see in the next slide that the EDQM plays a key role in the European regulatory framework, with its mission being the protection of public health by enabling the development, supporting the implementation, and monitoring the application of quality standards for safe medicines and their safe use. And in the next slide, we can see that further to the members of the European Pharmacopoeia, a large number of states worldwide are observers, and you can see on the right the list of the Asian countries that have the status of an observer of the European Pharmacopoeia, of course with India being one of them. If we move to the next slide and have a quick look to what is the certification procedure of which the EDQM inspection program is a part. So the CEP procedure concerns CEPs, which are the certificates of suitability to the monographs of the European Pharmacopoeia, which are official certificates granted by the EDQM. And actually, it's an international platform for the assessment of the quality of substances for pharmaceutical use, mainly APIs. They are open to any manufacturer of pharmaceutical substances, regardless of their geographical origin. And actually, a very large number of the companies involved in the CP procedure come from Asia and from India. In particular, it's legally based on these two EU directives, and it is a not mandatory way, since there are other ways to provide these demonstrations, such as the active substance master file. In the next slide, a couple of words about the EDQM inspection program, which, as I already mentioned, is an integral part of the certification procedure, and it is applicable for sites manufacturing APIs that are involved in the CP applications. The selection of sites that are eligible to be inspected by the EDQM is in line with EU legislation and is performed according to a risk-based approach. During the normal times, the pre-COVID times, we were performing around 30 to 40 inspections per year, most of them in Asia, in India, and in China. And during these inspections, we were verifying the compliance of the manufacturers with the particular CP dossier and the relevant monographs of the European Pharmacopoeia, as well as compliance with EU GMP, in particular Part 2, and any other annex that might be applicable. And of course, in case of a non-compliance identified during an EDQM inspections, actions are to be taken by the EDQM on the CEPs in which the site is involved. In the next slide, we'll have a look to the main challenge that was faced during this pandemic period, which was, of course, the need to minimize the spread of the pandemic, which led to travel restrictions, and which, of course, interrupted not only the EDQM's inspection program, but I believe the inspection programs of all the colleagues practically worldwide. So in order to try to overcome this obstacle, we decided to establish an alternative approach of distant assessment of the GMP status of manufacturers by comprising full and live interactions with the inspected company, which would provide us the possibility to evaluate the GMP compliance of a company via simultaneous interactions with them. We found this nice name for our program. We called it Real-Time Remote Inspections and started using the acronym Artemis. The pilot phase of Artemis started back in November 2020 and was concluded last December, and this was progressed on a voluntary basis. So in the next slide, we can see some of the key elements that were required for the success of Artemis. And of course, they included IT tools supported by our IT department, the use of conference meeting applications, and the use of a document sharing tool. Also, it was necessary for the inspected site to have appropriate IT infrastructure and hardware. Broadband internet, 3 or 4G networks, mobile, Wi-Fi hotspots, webcams, and scanners were necessary for such an inspection. In the next slide, you can see some more of these key elements, such as the sound preparation that the remote inspection requires, much more than an on-site inspection, I have to say, after having performed quite a number of them. So some preparatory meetings and the connectivity test needs to take place with the company in advance. And of course, last but not least, all involved parties need to demonstrate flexibility and quick adaptation to this new inspectional approach and the associated challenges. And this is valid both for the inspectors, both from the EDQM and also from the participating European supervisory authorities who have started to join our Artemis program, and also from the inspected companies. In the next slide, we can have a small taste of how the pilot phase of Artemis looked like, and these are actual scenes from remote inspections that we have performed in the frame of Artemis. During the live interaction with the company, we could manage to have live feed from the production areas, which enabled us even to observe manufacturing operations at the time they were performed. We'd also review live chromatographic data, which is a very important aspect of the data integrity verification. And in the next slide, we can see the different ways that we used in order to review documents during the inspections. There were 3 different ways. One was during the live interaction from the site areas. So what you can see on the top left is an equipment usage logbook, which was held in front of the web camera the company was using during the tour of the manufacturing areas, and it was possible to review the entries. On the top right, you can see the second option, which is reviewing the documents through screen sharing, which of course is applicable for documents that the company already has in an electronic form. And the third way was through our secure active collaboration tool, in which each time we perform an Artemis, we create a folder which we're sharing with the company, on which they can upload in a secure way all the documents that we request in advance, so that we can review them ahead of the inspection. In the next slide, we can see the conclusion of this pilot phase of Artemis, in the frame of which 11 sites were inspected, 7 of them in India. And we can very gladly say that our expectations were fulfilled. So suitable IT tools and the appropriate IT infrastructure and hardware were installed, tested and used. It was possible to have live interaction and review of documents and real-time exchange in a satisfactory way in the vast majority of cases. And even if the occasional technical problems were faced, it was easy to resolve them most of the time. And I have to say that the response of the companies, their adaptation and commitment were remarkable. And without all that, it would not be possible for Artemis to be successful. Also, we're very happy that colleagues from European inspectorates participated and have already issued a number of GMP certificates for the inspections carried out in the frame of Artemis. These GMP certificates, as some of your colleagues already know, have the indication that the inspection was performed as a distant assessment, which is for the moment the term officially used by the EMA. And what we have seen through Artemis is that the monitoring of compliance of API manufacturers with both GMP and CP applications through this real-time distant assessment was possible. In the next slide, we move on to the perspectives of the EDQM inspection program in, as we said, hopefully the end of this pandemic period, and as we move on to the next to the post-COVID period. So after evaluating the results and achievements of this Artemis pilot phase, we could see that Artemis is suitable to become an integral part of the EDQM system of supervision of manufacturers of APIs. So Artemis will complement the already existing tools of the EDQM inspection program, which are, as you can see on the lower left, the GMP assessment document-based procedure that we already have in place, and on the lower right, the on-site inspections. So Artemis will be a third pillar for the supervision of the GMP compliance of pharmaceutical manufacturers. In the next slide, we can see the considerations that we have now for the inclusion, not considerations, sorry, that we have decided to include Artemis as a normal part of the EDQM inspection program as of 2022. Which means that now the participation of the companies will no longer be voluntary as it was until now, but companies that are involved in CP applications may be notified for Artemis as they used to be notified for an on-site inspection. The process flow is more or less similar to an on-site inspection. And this notification is based on the company's commitment of willingness to be inspected, which needs to be signed for every CP application. And since it's not longer a voluntary one, but a normal part of our inspection program, from now on it will be subject to fees. The companies are expected to ensure that appropriate IT infrastructure and hardware are in place by the time of the inspection. And this is also taking into account that the companies may need some time in order to set up all this network and all this infrastructure. We may show some flexibility regarding the time slot for the inspection. And of course, further information about technical details will be shared with the companies concerned at the time of the notification and during the preparation phase of the inspection. In the next slide, we can see the potential role for Artemis in the future EDQM inspection program. So it will not only be for cases of travel restrictions, as it has been until now, due to either pandemic situations or safety concerns in destination countries, but it can also be a potential regular process for sites which have showed until now a good level of GFP compliance during previous EDQM inspections. It can also be a potential process to verify the implementation of specific parts of a CAPA if deemed necessary. And of course, it can also have its place if urgent GMP evaluation is needed, for instance, evaluation of a specific topic that might pose a risk to public health. Of course, in this case, Artemis would not replace an on-site inspection, but would practically act as the preparation for one. In the next slide, we can see another of the major perspectives that we're considering now for our inspection program. And this is resuming of on-site inspections. I know that several authorities have restarted inspecting, at least in international territories. It might be simpler just to take the car and drive a few kilometers from the agency's headquarters to visit a location in the same country, but it's quite more complicated when you have to take the plane and travel to another continent, as it is the case for EDQM inspectors. So first of all, we need to identify the conditions which will allow safe transcontinental travel by monitoring regularly the COVID-19 situation in the destination countries, as well as the entry and quarantine requirements that are in place. Another important consideration is how we can mitigate the risks during the travel and the stay in the destination country. Of course, we should follow the travel advices by airlines and authorities, and also investigate the relevant measures in the hotels in question, and of course apply risk management principles during our stay. But the most important part, of course, is how to mitigate risks during the inspection. And it would be very useful to have a query on the site's anti-COVID measures in place during the preparation phase of the inspection. Normally, unfortunately, social distancing, physical distancing, as you want to call it, might still need to be applied. Disinfectants and masks should be available. A good idea to apply in the meeting on the meeting room tables could be transparent bulk health separators. You will see an example right after. Another good idea for the review of documentation would be to share them on a screen instead of exchanging printouts between the different persons. Also, the maximum number of people that can be present at the same time in the same room might need to be defined, and a distance to be taken during lunch hours. In the next slide, you can see a couple of examples concerning the do's during an inspection, which could help to mitigate the risks. On the top left, as we already said, availability of disinfectants and masks, distancing, as you can see in the middle, during lunch hours, and I'm not sure if it's visible, transparent separators between the different persons that will participate during the documentation review. And in the next slide, you can see a nice example of what is, of course, not expected to happen during an on-site inspection in the future. We talked about social distancing and maximum number of persons to be present. It would be nice that such situations, this is an actual photograph from an EDQM inspection with tens of people following the inspectors around during the tour, and of course being present in front, next, and behind the inspectors during the documentation review. It would be nice if such scenes could be avoided in the future. So just to conclude, on the next slide, we can see how was EDQM's response to the COVID-19 pandemic from an inspection point of view, and also to keep inspectors in business and not staying out of job. We established an alternative approach of distant assessment, which we called Artemis. The response, adaptation, and commitment of the voluntary companies was of paramount importance. I would like to thank each and every one of them for their willingness and their participation. So based on that, the pilot phase of Artemis was concluded successfully, and now Artemis will be used as a complementary tool for the supervision of the GMP compliance of pharmaceutical manufacturers. Regarding the perspectives of the EDQM inspection program, the further development of the role of Artemis in different cases is ongoing, and of course the other major area is the considerations we need to take for resuming on-site inspection when the situation allows, which includes identifying the conditions allowing safe travel and also the mitigation of risks during travel, stay, and inspection. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope it was not too long and not too boring. Back to you, Dr. Rajiv.
Thank you so much. This was quite interesting. And I'm sure that many of the Indian pharma industry and the companies have gone through this exercise. And we are really happy that we created this infrastructure that you spoke about, and it's all ready. So there is a quite good amount of learnings from these inspections and also interactions. I don't think the on-site inspection or the online inspection have been different. Of course, the rigor has been absolutely same. All the companies have been very forthcoming in accepting these practices also and these procedures. And I'm sure that many of the companies who have gone through this exercise have been successfully inspected and they got the certification. But I'm sure that the same thing, if USFDA would be able to take up as part of the collaboration, we'll be more than happy, because I know that during the last 2 years, there have been a lot of inspections which are on the backlog, and they have to really catch up with these inspections in the coming months and years. So thank you so much for this insight. Before we go ahead, I would like to ask Dr. Rubina. I mean, you heard about all these collaborations. What do you expect on the harmonization of the regulatory framework across geographies? Because we are talking about India as a region, but do you think that there is a collaboration going to happen? Like we heard about collaboration for technology, we heard about several mutual recognition. And do you think that this is going to come up in the coming years and months?
Thank you for the question. And I've been working in the International Cooperation Division. So I do work on this collaboration and cooperation with the various regulatory agencies in the pharmaceuticals and regulations and of pharmaceuticals, devices, vaccines, biologicals, and in fact, a lot of such collaborations in the various platforms has enabled us to take a lot of regulatory decisions. It's not only the guidelines, but real, interaction over the ICMRA platform or some specific platforms in which we have directly interacted and the regulatory decisions have been taken up. This is related to the different regulatory decisions in collaboration with each other, which has really helped to get these therapeutics and the vaccines or the devices in the country to meet the public health emergency. Now, coming to the harmonization on the standards, would like to say there are minimum standards. When we say CGMP, we say it is the minimum standards which everybody has to meet. Now, when you want to improve your systems to an advanced technology to make it a continuous, a very high quality, meeting a lot of like a continuous improvement, when we talk about that, then definitely you have to adopt some upgraded technology. So it should suit to your requirements. So what I'm trying to say is that the manufacturers who want to export, who want to meet a specific requirements of a specific regulatory market, they can definitely. So in other words, what I'm indirectly trying to say is that there are minimum requirements of GMP, GCP, GLP, which should be met. But it cannot be a harmonized standards throughout the geography because the geography is not same. So that is the reason when we say when we make the ICH tools, the ICH Common Technical Document submissions, there is a regular regional information part. So you always have to comply with the regional requirements to meet the requirements of that particular countries, that particular populations, that particular climatic zone. There are so many things. Now, what is the requirement of that country? So accordingly, so there has to be harmonization. There has to be common understanding of the minimum requirements. But when we say that a common standard throughout the geography, it depends because there are a lot of steps in the specifications of the pharmaceuticals. It's not only which are different for the different geographies, which will be definitely different. So this I think is the message which I want to say, that minimum standards are there, have to be there. When we say CGMP, we mean the minimum GMP standards. But and harmonization is important. We are supposed to aspire for that. Yes, we have to look into the specific requirements of that particular geography. I can just give an example because as you were talking about this vaccine, so I just say that when the vaccines are to be supplied to the African continent, to the various regions, there are very specific requirements which the WHO pre-qualified vaccine manufacturers of India has to test, which we call as an extended temperature condition. So this is a very specific test which all the manufacturers has to do to ensure that the vaccines are given actually will not be stored at 2 to 8 degrees centigrade, but will go to the last supply point, the PHC, where actually there is no storage, cold storage, and it will go by different carrier, means that there is no cold storage points. So what I'm trying, that is, so you have to say the excursion studies and all. Specifically, there are very specific region-specific studies for the vaccines. So that is what standards has to be same, a minimum quality standards. But there are some region-specific requirements which has to be met by all the manufacturers and the stakeholders.
Thank you so much. I mean, this was something really great conversation with all four of you. Before we end it, I would like Dr. Rubina to again, get on one more question, and maybe I'll ask the same question to others as well. What must the Indian industry do to improve the inspection outcomes? Maybe Dr. Rubina.
Okay. It is what I should say, the inspection outcome. One is that why don't we try to maintain the system in place, like a system of quality monitoring. So when I say quality management system, everybody, it's a very general term. But the thing is that it starts from the very beginning till the product discontinuation. So why don't we have a system of continuous, I'm not talking about continuous verification and continuous monitoring. That I'm not trying to talk about the ICH Q11 or Q12 at this perspective, but I'm trying to say that a very good control, when you develop the product, when the product development started, why don't we make it in such a manner that we have everything fixed or specifications fixed, everything is really done, and so that, because I find that the trained manpower, the facility, these are available. It's not that the people are quite well having the knowledge, the experience, the capacity, but there are also a group of people who are not up to the mark. So there is a gap between the different, when we talk about the different levels of the industries and the different levels. So I think that gap has to be fulfilled, so that how we can do, like some of the things like the training by IDMA or the IPA, or the training of which WHO was conducting with the college, medical colleges for all these industries. That is quite helpful in making up this knowledge gap. And definitely when we comply and stick to the quality standards, then definitely we will not have that errors, coming up the error, the deviations. We can minimize the error and deviations. And the most important thing which I feel is the data integrity. I mean, you record, you collaborate as the process is being done. It should be really recorded, and there should not be anything which creates doubt in the mind of the regulators. So that's a thing. I think that is the way it can be done. So I should again say the same words. I say Q8, Q9, and Q10. These are the overarching guiding principles on which the manufacturer should best. So you have a good development, quality risk management, and a quality management system, which will enable to really establish a robust manufacturing system and the specification set specifications. So I think I should say.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think this comes, with all your, interactions with your earlier inspections, and absolutely you covered the entire gamut of the pharma industry. And you touched upon a very important part about data integrity and the continuous recording of data. And I think the guidance that we get from ICHQ 8, 9, and 10 will definitely make sure that we are in complete compliance in our operations. Dr. Manisha, can I ask you the same question?
Thank you, Rajiv. And I think it's a very critical question when we talk about pharmaceutical inspection outcomes. I think the critical part we do need to bear in mind is that whether it is the pharma industry as such, we are in a state of continuous transition. And every time we look at inspection outcomes, they have to meet the latest requirements that may arise. As we saw that the inspection requirements aligned to the requirements on public health measures that we needed when we were looking at the availability of vaccines, whether through the COVAX facility or through the ACT accelerator which the WHO had put in place. So when we look at inspection requirements, and in fact, when you looked at the rolling FDA review that was specially put in place when we were trying to get the vaccines off board immediately, this was a new innovative measure that was put in place by the regulators, which never existed before. And it has also given an insight into new ways of doing things when we look at inspection outcomes, and how we could align the public health goal of getting a product onto the market in time in a way that the regulator and manufacturer can work jointly to get the product on board. So this is something which is very critical and has been a great learning experience. Having said that, when we talk about quality, we also, the pharma quality ecosystem is a very wide bandwidth. We look at the pharma quality ecosystem in terms of the industry. And when you are looking at IPPA, we tend to look inwards and we try to see what we can do better as an industry. But we also need to bear in mind that the ecosystem has a large a number of players and stakeholders, which from the door of the pharmaceutical enterprises, it has to reach the consumer. And also before it reaches the door of the pharmaceutical enterprises, when you are sourcing the raw material, you are also interacting with another set of suppliers and others. So when we look at the whole bandwidth on this quality ecosystem, what is it that the inspection outcomes need to keep in mind when we are achieving these outcomes become important? And I do think that we need to, pharma, I'm sure you're already doing it, but we learn from other industries when we say that, what leaves are at every stage is the best in class. So basically, the best inspection outcome would be that inspection is not necessary at all, because you're able to certify quality at every stage of the process. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was something really good. Not to have inspection, but yes, every industry and every company should have that kind of a responsibility for the activities and the operations that they monitor. Dr. Sotirios?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Rajiv.
Yeah, quick one, because we are running short of time.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Same question to Dr. Kristan also.
Yes, of course, I agree with whatever was mentioned. Quality maintenance and the maintenance of quality on all levels and in all fields, in all areas related to pharmaceutical manufacturing is of paramount importance. Compliance to all regulations, requirements, etc. Easy to say, not always so easy to implement, of course. Just to go back to one thing that Dr. Rubina mentioned, the gap that we see sometimes during the competence and the training level, the training between different levels of staff, not only in Indian manufacturers, also in other companies. Sometimes this training is only focused on, let's say, middle and higher management levels. It is important that it covers, depending of course on the needs, all the areas at all the levels of the staff involved in pharmaceutical operations. And of course, as it was mentioned before, I think all the companies should have, let's say, a self-critical look, and self-inspection is quite an important tool that is provisioned by ICH Q7, by GMP in general. So I would encourage companies to exercise it in a very careful way, because it can really help them improve a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And a quick one from Dr. Kristan.
I echo everything that has been said by the fellow panelists. Dr. Rubina mentioned the guidances that we obviously use and to have at our fingertips. So that would definitely be one. I will say on a positive note that we're very encouraged to see the trends going toward learning from past mistakes and past issues. So, data integrity was such a focus a couple of years ago because we were seeing issues with audit trails, but we've been seeing people attend, conferences like this and workshops to talk about, the issues that came up with audit trails, for instance, and to learn from that about validation practices. And so we've been seeing positive outcomes from people going to trainings and being a part of the conversation on how to have better data integrity and things like that. So, just to say that training and being a part of the discussion and being transparent about the issues they've been seeing to truly address the issues has, we've seen positive results from that. So we hope to see that continue.
Thank you so much. I'm really grateful to each one of you for sparing your time and your insight. Over to you.
Rajiv, we do want to thank you for an excellent moderation of the session. You did a great job.
Thank you so much.
For being so pleasant.
It was great learning from all of us.
Thank you.
So much.